number B5. We'll add a B5.
Yes, sir, please.
Okay, and go ahead and describe that for us.
This would be a requested action to approve the TPO annual report. And this was emailed to all members on Tuesday, but we'll review the recommendation under the item B5 and ask for action.
Okay.
I'm sorry, did you say B5?
Under new business, add item 5.
I
Under
add an item 5.
add item 5, the review and request of approval of the annual report. And I think we'll be able to put it up on the screen, and it was emailed from the RRTPO email address. RRTPO, if you're searching for it, it came from the RRTPO email address on Tuesday. But we'll have it on the screen, and I think, Jack, you're gonna go over it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so with that amendment, unless there's any other amendments, I'm going to say we have an agenda and we will dive in.
Mr. Chairman, you might want to invite a motion.
Our
Motion to
lawyer
approve the
tells
agenda
us
as amended, Mr. Chairman.
we need a motion, so motion by Mr. Williams, second by Mr. Hodges. Voice vote is okay, I think, on this, so voice vote onto adopting the agenda as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, so thank you, Mr. Gregory. We have an agenda now, very official. So item 2 is approval of last month's minute meetings. So the chair will entertain a motion or
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Williams and a second by Ms. Jordan. Thank you. Thank you both. Any comments, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you all. We now have open public comment period. I believe persons on Zoom can raise their hand, but we'll start with if there's anybody present in the room that wishes to address the policy board. Now's the time to do so. All right, seeing nobody in the room, Ms. Firestone, is anybody raising their hand or indicating they wish to speak to us on
No,
Zoom?
we haven't had anyone indicate they wish to speak.
All right, I'll close the open public comment period, and we're already up to item 4 on the agenda, the chair's report. I'm going to kind of tag team a little bit with Mr. Parsons on this, just getting, I'll have the Chesterfield County highlight, but I was going to also, there's pictures on the screen of Mr. Parsons and Mr. Carroll and I visited the new offices, and you can see from the picture, this was about a week ago or so, you can see from the pictures that the metal framing is in place, the studs, the interior work, but no drywall, but I think they're talking about drywall like anytime this week coming up soon. The good news is that the superintendent there on the job site told us that they were running ahead of schedule, and so the lease here ends, the lease at this location ends in October. Is that, at the risk of putting in too many pictures, but I left that one in there. Have you seen such 3 good-looking guys like that? And see, look at the back. Yeah, that's great, the skyline. I was just going to compliment the city. I haven't been to this part. I haven't been to this. This is, I guess, a Lynx Ventures mixed-use project. The hatch food is in the first floors of both these buildings. There's apartments in one area, then this office space. I think this is the 3rd floor, right? It's got a great view, and I guess there's a tenant taking some of the top floors. I looked on Qualify. This is a really buzzing area, and it was really nice. It's exciting, and Richmond should be proud. And I think we're gonna have a nice space down there.
Isn't there gonna be a tall building there in a year or two?
Well, that's another. That's not far from here. I think you can see that location from this over where I guess they're looking at another tall building. But yeah, this is a nice location, nice building, and we enjoyed some food at many diners down there. So what is can you give us any, I think we're looking to make it in January. This might be a good time for you just to talk a little bit about where we're going to be meeting the next couple of months?
Sure, yes, sir. We are working out still trying to work out the details for our November meeting. We have a couple sites that we're still talking to. The December meeting of the TPO Policy Board will be at the VDOT District Office. Many of us are familiar with that from CBTA meeting down in Chesterfield. And the January meeting right now is scheduled for
January
No,
5th,
Randolph-Macon.
the 5th.
Randolph-Macon. We are looking at
January, we're
Randolph-Macon.
scheduled, we're gonna, January,
Yes.
Randolph-Macon, okay.
If things work out and we are able to get into the new space, we may adjust, but right now we're hedging our bets and looking at space at Randolph-Macon.
So that's a good update. I think at the executive committee, we were thinking we might make it here, but Randolph-Macon, maybe for January. And we'll let everybody know very soon about November.
Yes. We are scheduled to be out of this space in the next 2 weeks. Everything is coming down following the next Friday. So everything will be packed and moved. So our staff will be remote for the next couple months. And we are, as you heard, scheduling space for the boards and commissions. So TPO, CBTA, and Planner VA Commission are all going to be meeting at satellite locations at least through the end of December.
Okay. All right, you're controlling your picture, so next picture. All right, so I went down to Chesterfield, that's the old courthouse. This month, as y'all know, last month, Charles City, we learned that it was really exciting to hear all things going on in Charles City. So this month, I asked Mr. Carroll if he would give us a little highlight to Chesterfield. And thank you for pointing, I asked you, where should I go? And you mentioned the historic site there. I had not been there, but there's a lot in that little area by the courthouses. I go to the courthouse being a lawyer, but just down the street is the historical courthouse with a lot of, it's a really pretty area. So turn it over to Mr. Carroll for a short highlight on Chesterfield County.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd certainly also invite my colleague, Mr. Holland, if he decides to hop in with some other things that I may miss. We saw last month that Commissioner Atkins set the bar very high with his presentation. And so I had to, ask staff to help so we could at least, follow that act, but he did a great job. Some of the most recent, and you've probably seen some of this in media releases, some recent economic development achievements in Chesterfield that certainly are significant, not just for us, but for the entire region. Lego Corporation is going to be building a $1 billion investment in our Meadowville Landing Technology Center, a 1.7 million square foot facility that'll bring 1,761 jobs to the region, high-tech jobs that we're going to have to make sure we have young adults and older adults trained to actually work in that environment. Plenty is a vertical farming company out of California that's going to build a $300 million facility in Meadowville Landing. And they will be producing fruits and vegetables year-round in this facility. And some that are not actually grown in the United States, if I remember correctly, Jim.
That's correct.
And then Civica is a pharmaceutical company that is going to be building a $27 million facility in Meadowville Landing and producing affordable insulin and other drugs that are necessary to treat people in our community at an affordable rate, which is what we look forward to having that for our area of the state. And then Carvana at the very bottom, Jim, myself, and the governor and many others visited the new site that's opened off of Woods Edge Road. It's an unbelievable facility. They have almost 100 lifts inside that vehicle, and it's a prep center. And they expect to have about 10,000 vehicles on site at any given time, where they bring them in and then they go through them with a fine-tooth comb. Any work that needs to be done gets repaired on the vehicles, and then they will be shipped over to Richmond to the tower. And there's a room, several pods in there where you put the vehicle in. It actually spins around. It takes 64 pictures from all different angles of the vehicle, so that if you want to buy a car online, you can see everything you need to see about that car. And we actually sat in the room as it rotated a vehicle around, and we didn't break the camera, so that was good. Next slide. We have had historically a flooding problem out in the western part of the Matoka district on Otterdale Road. There were 3 bridges that when we get big storms flood, and basically there's a section of the road that becomes stranded. And so we as a board took an action 2 years ago, about a year and a half ago, to approve necessary improvements. And the first section of that is the Horsepen Creek, which now has been, they had to raise that road up 8 feet and put a brand new bridge across it. And so I was out there the other day and we took some pictures, and we opened it up for the community for like 4 or 5 days so they could kind of get an idea of the work that was done, and a lot of very positive comments from the community as they can't believe how well the project came out. They've now shut down the next section, which is Blackman's Creek. And that was another section of the road that floods, and they will be raising that road section up by 8 feet and putting a new bridge in there. And that should take, hopefully, they'll finish ahead like they did with this one, probably 6 months. And then the last section of that will be the Otterdale Branch Creek, which is the most northern section that floods. And again, they'll be raising the road up there and making necessary improvements to. And we really viewed this as a public safety issue when you couldn't get fire, police in there. If someone was having a medical issue, we couldn't get trucks in there when it flooded. And so I appreciate the support from my other board members to take this action. Next slide. So the Spring Rock Grain Development is on Midlothian Turnpike. It's across from our Stonebridge development, which used to be Cloverleaf Mall many years ago. It's been an economic development project. When you look at Stonebridge, that's been very successful in the area and is still growing. We actually have a hotel that'll be coming in the next year or two from Shaman Hotels, and that'll be a 25,000 square foot conference center and hotel with amenities. And across the street, we were originally looking for land to build a police station. And they made us an offer we couldn't refuse on purchasing the entire property. And so now we're in the process with a redevelopment plan. There will be a brand new police station built so that when you come onto Chippenham Parkway into Chesterfield County, you'll see a brand new police station right there. The old one up there right now is an old barbecue place, Bill's Barbecue. When I was a young police officer, I used to get dinner there. The sandwiches were good, but nevertheless, then later on, I worked out of there as a supervisor. And it's a facility that we've rented for years, and it's time for us to put a more modern facility. And right there in Midlothian is gonna be a great spot. And we have a lot of great things planned in here that we're gonna have some office space, some residential space, a double ice rink, hockey rink. I mean, Jim, am I missing anything?
You're doing well, keep up.
It's like, hurry up, we're almost done.
Keep going.
Next slide. And then we have, like most of us in the area, we have a bond referendum coming up in November. And $375 million of the bond referendum were used for schools, 45.7 million for libraries, 38.2 million for parks and recreation, and 81.1 million for public safety. And that's really for 2 police stations and fire stations that are necessary to be built. We've been holding community meetings, public meetings, Facebook meetings, all across the county in each district, trying to bring awareness to the community that this is going to be on the agenda, on the ballot coming up in November, and why the county is putting this forward. And then last but not least, I actually held a community meeting, which is not, there's no slide for this. We have a historic school in Matoka, the Matoka Elementary School. It was built in 1937. And when we built, as part of our previous bond referendum, we actually built a new Ettrick Elementary School and a new Matoka Elementary School. So the old school, while Ettrick was being built, was used as an elementary school for that. And then once Ettrick was built, they moved there. And so we had a community meeting last night with some proposals on what we could utilize the historic school for. And one of them is actually an idea that we got from the city of Richmond, and that is to actually utilize a section of the school for senior housing. And this has been done in other parts of the state and other parts of the country quite successfully with these historical buildings. It's a beautiful building, it's still in great shape. And there will be, so the community came out last night and we had a great discussion, and we're gonna continue those discussions moving forward. Anything I'm missing?
That's great. I was asked that same question yesterday at a community meeting about that school. So they had plans for it, so that's great to hear. One thing I would add, is I think is so important, I always like to say to groups, is the city of Henricus, which was founded in 1611, Henrico, Chesterfield, and we always urging our Richmond friends to join us as well. Join us at the city of Henricus, which is a historical site that's been recreated from 1611, as you know, 1607, Jamestown, 1611, city of Henricus, and the foundation as well, doing great things. And I think it would warrant a visit just for educational purposes. VACO will be meeting in Richmond this November, and so that will be a great site to visit during VACO's excursion with that. And so I think that's a great overview. And I might also add that, our schools continue to grow. We have about 65 schools, 63,000 students, and we continue to have to expand to accommodate our school system, which has a budget of almost $906 million for just the school system alone. So just thank you, great overview.
One last thing, with that, we're rebuilding Fallen Creek Middle
Fallen
School
Creek Middle
right
School
now.
broke ground last week on that. I was very pleased, which was before the bond referendum. We had to move forward.
We had to raise money for that.
Swiftly for that. So we borrowed the money last year.
And we're building another one in Western Hall Street.
In Western Hall Street near Tomahawk as well, another middle school. We're building it new from the ground up. And one thing I'll add about that vertical farm, which astounds me still, is that it represents 35 acres of growing area. So if they go vertically, it represents 35 acres of growing space. And if you ever been on a farm like I have, I'm from a farm, by the way, that's pretty good acreage, 3,500. And so that's gonna be vertical, which will be astounding for the strawberries Driscoll strawberries that they're gonna grow.
Thank
there.
you, Mr. Holland
So-
and Mr. Carroll. Do you have one more thing?
Last thing, because, we can talk about Chesterfield all day.
No,
You're the one who asked me to do
We're
it.
picking up on that.
So the last thing, I would have been remiss if I didn't say that the Eppington Foundation, which off of Epps Falls Road, the Eppington Plantation, which was Thomas Jefferson's sister's home on the Appomattox, will be holding an open event on October the 22nd, and it's in Chesterfield County, off of River Road, off of Epps Falls Road. And it's a fundraiser for the Eppington Foundation, which, in full disclosure, I sit on the foundation as well. And it's a great event. We've been to it before. You want to come and see Thomas Jefferson's sister's historical house? Come on down. Thank you.
His nieces were buried there.
Thank you. Thank you all. That's great. It's,
History.
the Chippenham Mall, it's really exciting to see that. That's been a long time coming. It's been many years. I remember when that opened. It goes way back. So a lot of exciting stuff. Thank you both. Good report. All right, let's dive into secretary report before we get to new business. Mr. Parsons?
Yes, sir, thank you very much.
I skipped executive committee report. I mistakenly skipped it. We're gonna, when we get to transportation forum planning in the business items, I will give an update on what we talked about in the executive committee. But real quickly, 30 seconds, the executive committee, we looked at the bylaws, the one-page section of the bylaws about the role of the executive committee. And the consensus of the executive committee was we'll continue to meet, or keep on the schedule of meeting every month, but we may just cancel executive committee meetings if there's nothing on the policy board meeting, like significant agenda items. But the executive committee is going to, I think, focus a little bit more on its role of approving or making recommendations to this entire policy board, which we do now, but I'm going to ask Chet to be more specific. When something comes up, what does the TAC say on it? And then what did the executive committee say on it? So we'll continue, for those of you that have been in executive committee meetings, a lot of times it's a review of what's coming up on the policy board. We will continue that unless there's nothing that really needs to be reviewed, in which case we'll just cancel those meetings. And then I will talk about, in later in the agenda, the one other thing that we talked about, the executive committee meeting. Sorry, Mr. Parsons, but now to your secretary's report.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 5A on the agenda is the work status and financial report for August of '22. Again, this is early in the fiscal year, the second month. The one item of note that you may have seen is that I believe the long-range transportation plan work task is already at 48%. That is planned. There's work being done right now for socioeconomic data projections and other advanced work for our next long-range plan. So that's work that we had scheduled early in this year. And it all leads into our scenario planning project. I'll provide an update later on the agenda. Other than that work task, everything is still very early on in the year in terms of hours charged and staff time. So I don't think there should be any other surprises in the work status report. The other item 5B is the CTAC report from the last meeting of the CTAC. That is on page 22 of 42 in the agenda. We had two presentations. The first was an update from John Hillegas from the Greater Washington Partnership on the blueprint that the partnership has developed, as well as talking about feasibility of north-south BRT. They put out a report, it's probably a few months ago now, looking at the options for north-south BRT, and there was a great discussion held by the committee on that. The other item was Kelly Rowan from the City of Richmond, Office of Equitable Transportation and Mobility, talked about the Richmond Connects program, and specifically phase 2 of the process, which is kicking off now. The next advisory committee, if anyone is interested who is not already plugged in, is October 18th at the Main Street Station. So we are continuing with the CTAC on a bi-monthly basis. So those meetings are being planned and scheduled by Ken Lance on our staff, and I think Ken's been doing a great job in lining up informational speakers and providing more information to our community transportation advisory committee members. That's all I have for the Secretary's report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so I see, I was looking at the next advisory committee meeting on October 18th, but that's for the Richmond Connects group.
That's correct.
CTAC. So is it such that you will get a Richmond Connects report at the next CTAC meeting, or is that just hit or miss whether Richmond Connects will come to the CTAC meeting? In other words, I'm wondering if there's a plan to get an update, because it looks like a lot of things are happening with Richmond Connects, and does CTAC stay involved in that and keep tabs on that? Or is
yes, our staff is definitely involved, and we will. I'll make a point to get an update when there's one available.
Good. All right. Any questions? Any comments from policy board members?
Just a comment, Mr. Chair, in
Mr. Holland.
regards to the overview of the Greater Washington Partnership. I would love to hear the vision and the feasibility of the regional rail, as noted, Route 1, Old Street, and Midlothian Turnpike. And so they'll be interested to hear that information and to hear what's feasible, because I think that's a viable option. We had a former supervisor who considered this many years ago in Chesterfield, who has since passed away, but she often articulated rail, especially Midlothian rail, might add. So, just wanted to share that. Purposeless future.
Any city council, anybody, Richmond City Council want to comment on Richmond Connects? That's still early in its stages, but it looks interesting. If you want to, I wanted to offer, Mr. Addison?
Yes, as I think the council representative on Richmond Connects, it's a great conversation. I think really engaged across a variety of viewpoints on the need of really aligning our kind of future city and region around where transit can take us, bring us together. I think there's a lot of opportunity to look at the resources needs for infrastructure, zoning, and how the conversation works around places of interest, current and future. And that's kind of going to be a long-term projection, but I think with previous comment from Dr. Holland of rail, high-speed rail, maybe even other conversations of light rail potentially in the horizon. We have opportunities to look at how this all connects for the benefit of the entire region. So I think the group is well suited to continue this work. There'll be more updates, things to share as we proceed. We are also exploring the creation of a Department of Transportation around how to organize our resources as a city to best deliver on the recommendations from Richmond Connects as we look at our entire city too.
That is, and you've got a lot of comments to go through there, too, sir. 100 comments. It sounds like it's engaged.
Yeah, it's a
There's
very-
a lot of engagement going on. That's good.
Very engaged.
Passionate constituents, yes.
Yes. Okay, awesome. Thank you all. We'll move to new business. Item 1, FOIA council guidance. I think our attorney's going to speak to that, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Gregory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the body, many of you, if not all of you, have heard this before, so I'll keep it brief, but before you today for discussion only are 2 draft policy documents that are in response to and required by new provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act that was amended this past General Assembly session. Those amendments went into effect September 1st. So we've all had a lot of experience with virtual meetings the past several years, right? So in response to that, in response to a lot of demand, the General Assembly passed legislation to provide greater flexibility for public bodies to meet and individual members of public bodies to meet via remote telecommunications means. And these policies provide for that. So there's basically 3 things going on there. There's 3 ways that members can, or public bodies can meet via telecommunications means. One is under a declaration of a local or statewide emergency. So that's now moved into its own section of the code, and that's basically the same as it was before. So that's going to be but that's not what we're concerned with today. What we're concerned with today are a proposed policy for all virtual public meetings and a proposed policy for remote participation of individual members under certain circumstances. And in order for public bodies like this to allow for that, you have to adopt policies, and then you have to implement and follow those policies consistently. Okay, so they're listed as being on pages 23 and 26 in your packet. So they were included in that packet that was sent out. They're actually in reverse order there. The remote participation of members is on page 23, and the all virtual meetings policy is on page 26. So the remote participation of members policy, we'll take that first if you don't mind, is in a circumstance where an individual member, pursuant to certain circumstances, can request permission to participate in the meeting via telecommunications means if one of those circumstances arises, whereas they have a personal medical situation or emergency or condition that requires them to not be able to attend the meeting in person, or a member of their family has such a situation that requires them to have to participate remotely, they can't make it to the meeting, or if they're more than 60 miles from the location of the meeting. And that 60-mile guideline or requirement is in the state code. Okay, that's a statutory requirement. So if they're more than 60 miles away from the meeting location, they can request to be able to participate remotely. Now, there are limitations on that. Individual members can only do that 2 times per year, or for 25% of the meetings held per year, whichever is greater, or consecutively within another all virtual public meeting. So that's what the policy provides for. If you all were to adopt the policy, then individual members pursuant to that policy could participate remotely. Now, there may be a question, how are the members today who are participating virtually able to do that if we don't have this policy in place? Well, that's a good question. And the answer is because the city of Richmond still has in place a declared state of emergency for the COVID-19 pandemic. So because that's in place under the emergency declaration provisions of FOIA, they can participate remotely via telecommunications means. And that's still in place. So they're all square today. What we're talking about, what these policies would do, and what we're talking about today is allowing for that going forward regardless of any declaration of a state of emergency. The all virtual public meetings policy would allow the entire body to convene via remotely via telecommunications means when all the members are participating from different locations via, say, Zoom or any of those online platforms that we're all used to now. That, again, has the similar limitations on it. You can't just do it for any reason. You can only do it 2 times per year or up to 25% of your annual meetings, whichever is greater. And so do you need that kind of a policy? I know there's there's various opinions on the efficacy of meeting remotely and whether that's a good policy or not. But in order to be able to do it, you have to have the policy in place. And as we all know, there are circumstances, whether it be a health emergency or a weather emergency, there are circumstances under which you may want to exercise that authority. You may want to be able to do that. So I would recommend you adopt the policies, put them in place. It doesn't mean you have to rely upon the policies on a regular basis, but at least you would have them in place, and you could meet that way if you needed to. And then individual members under the other policy that I just described could meet via telecommunications means if those requirements were met. Now, they have to request approval to do that, and the body needs to approve that. But you have to do that objectively and fairly and consistently. You have to comply with the policy. You can't sort of do it for political reasons or for any other reasons. But I know this body would never do such a thing. So that's my report. Happy to answer any questions if you wish.
So I think you'll have some, but any questions from?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I'll come to you second. Ms. Jordan raised her hand first, so.
Thank you. I mean, I think the goal is that we want everyone to be able to participate, and I think this is a great starting point. I just wonder if we would not want to make it a little bit less specific so that if someone's car broke down or, no?
Can't do that.
Okay.
Well, they have, that would be
Oh,
for a
car
personal.
can't break down?
No, that's impossible. No, that would be a personal, that would be a personal reason. So you would report to the chairman, Mr. Chairman, can I participate via remote telecommunications means my car broke down this morning and I can't get there. And he would report that to the body, and then the body would have to vote to approve your participation via remote telecommunications.
Okay, so that's item B.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So you said item B, do we have the right screen, up on the screen, do we have the right spot that we were talking about?
I'm not sure if we have the particular item up on screen that Ms. Jordan mentioned. It would be on the policy for remote participation of members. Item.
Page 24.
Yes, ma'am.
That was the top of
Correct.
24, I think, or top of 23. So,
25.
process, okay.
Page 25. My question's been clarified, so.
There we go,
There you go.
members allowed. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Williams,
thank you.
yes.
I just want to clarify for myself. Mr. Gregory, when you talk about policies and being available to be used when needed, what is the distinction between policies that are available when needed and our bylaws? Is there any distinction?
Yes, there is a distinction, Mr. Williams, if I may, Mr. Chairman. The Code of Virginia, the FOIA Act, only requires these policies be put in place. It doesn't require the public body to adopt a bylaw amendment or anything like that. So these are just policies. Because they're just policies, they don't have to go through the same process as a bylaw amendment. As you can obviously see, the General Assembly changes state laws from time to time, particularly FOIA. And the policy, if you adopt these policies, you'll have the flexibility to amend those policies as needed in response to potential statutory changes by the General Assembly. It doesn't require a bylaw amendment. These are not bylaw amendments. You don't have to go through the bylaw amendment process to adopt these. It would just simply take what I would recommend as a roll call vote to adopt and implement these policies. We're not.
Mr. Chairman, if I may follow up question.
Yes.
If we do adopt these policies, then does that govern the way that we meet going forward?
It could, yes, absolutely, it could.
I didn't ask if it could. What I'm asking, does it? Because I want to be very clear in my own mind, if we adopt these policies, how it affects or does not affect our meetings. I want to make sure there's no ambiguity is where I'm going, because it's not quite clear to me yet, having policies and having them in place and having them available versus what we're going to actually do with these policies as it pertains to our meetings going forward.
I'd be happy to try to answer that question.
Yeah, please.
As you recall, back in May of this year, the body took action to amend its bylaws to strike the provision that prohibited meeting by telecommunications means, right?
Yes.
And you did that in preparation for and with cognizance that the FOIA statute had been changed. Okay, so now we're at a stage where those changes to FOIA have become effective as of September 1st. So in order to comply with FOIA and to have the capability to allow individual members or the entire body to meet via telecommunications means remotely, you have to adopt these policies. You're not required to adopt these policies. If you don't adopt the policies, then members would not be able to participate via remote telecommunications means, and the body would not be able to meet remotely via telecommunications means. Now, that being said, that would not prohibit, under the existing declaration of a local emergency that Richmond still has in place, that would not prevent what's going on today from continuing to happen as long as that declaration of emergency is still in place. Members could participate via remote telecommunications means under that or pursuant to that local declaration of an emergency. But if that were to be extinguished, or if that were to be to go out of effectiveness, then that capability would go away.
Mr. Chairman, if I have one more question.
Yes, sir. One more.
Okay. State of emergency, what you're saying, basically trumps the policies right now that we're going to be discussing. Because the state of emergency says, you can meet remotely under a state of emergency.
I wouldn't say it trumps it, but that provision of FOIA allows for it in addition to these other allowances, if certain circumstances are met. So they work sort of together.
Okay.
Continue your follow-up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I bet where I'm going is, does that apply to the whole body or just to the members from Richmond?
Under FOIA, the entire, and pursuant to the local declaration of an emergency, individual members can participate in the meeting via telecommunications means from remote locations. In addition, if the body so chose, it could meet entirely remotely via telecommunications means pursuant to that local declaration of emergency.
Can I interrupt you there and ask a question? Is that second reason only because if we were to meet, it would be in the city?
That's what I was saying.
Yeah,
Right.
have it in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, and the body, if the meeting is in the city, or yes, if you were to have a meeting outside of the city, that's an interesting question. I would probably say no, that meeting would be outside of the footprint of that declaration of a state of emergency, so that meeting could not be conducted via all virtual.
So for the time, for the window of time.
That's not a question I've looked at,
Well,
but I think
For
that's
the
my gut
window,
reaction.
for the window of time, then until we get into the Hall Street location, we will maybe be meeting elsewhere. So if we don't adopt this policy and our next meeting is in Hanover, then there will be no provision or no means for remote participation.
That's correct, assuming you don't adopt this policy, right? Under current circumstances, that's correct. Now, members could call in just like any other member of the public and
But they can't
view the
participate,
meeting,
right.
but they would not be permitted to participate in the meeting.
Okay, Ms. Laskewell.
So I'm not sure I got a clear answer here. So the question was, under the state of emergency conditions, is it only Richmond City members? Or is because we're meeting in the city of Richmond, that applies to every member?
It's the location of the meeting.
Okay.
that
So the answer is that it
answer.
applies to every member because we are meeting in the city of Richmond.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Addison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To not belabor a conversation around an issue that the city of Richmond has enacted, would you mind if I explore the necessity of maintaining our state of emergency?
I
Yes,
think
Mr.
inquiring
Richmond.
minds would love to know what
Okay.
Richmond's gonna do.
As to not belabor a conversation around something that we are creating as a
I love having
potential
an option.
conflict, let me see what we can do in that capacity.
In terms of,
Do we need to have this still enacted from the pandemic, an issue?
wait, so have you finished your,
Yes, I am.
Ms. O'Malley?
Well, when Henrico established when we established our state of emergency, we tied it to when the COVID, because it was because of COVID. When the COVID cases get below a certain level, we would rescind it. We did that.
Yep.
And at a prior meeting, I had COVID and I participated remotely. But I did it, I mean, it was okayed and voted on. I mean, I'll just put that, but Henrico also has in place a policy such as this. You know, we have I guess it's a resolution and an ordinance, whatever it is, ordinance or whatever this becomes, ordinance or resolution.
Policy.
I know it's a policy, but we made it, you know, an ordinance or.
It could be enacted by an ordinance or a resolution.
I've forgotten which. And I participated in a Henrico meeting and Frank chaired it because he's vice chair and I couldn't be there physically. And so when that happens, even though you're the chairman, you don't run the meeting remotely. I'll just put that out there. That was one of the things we had decided on. But,
Yeah,
well,
okay.
I just point that out, but we aren't gonna be voting on this today.
It's not recommended, you
Yeah.
could, but
But because I wanna look at it a little bit closer, but not that I'm thinking very positively toward these both. I'm just saying, I wanna just look at it a little more. I did look at it, obviously, but I wanna have somebody else look at it too. But, when we vote on it, we would then begin this, so maybe the next meeting is, I'll say if it is in Ashland, maybe it is, and we need to discuss that too. I mean, you're right, your comment about, you know, you couldn't do it remotely. I'm just, unless Ashland has.
if I may respond to that, I don't know if Dr.
You don't have to.
Yeah, well, let's look, Dr. Newbill's been trying to get in. Dr. Newbill, the floor is yours.
Yes, I was just, and to Mr. Addison's point, at the next meeting to give an update in terms of where the city of Richmond is in terms of meetings and the modifications that we have made as well. So we can provide that.
Mr. Gregory.
Pursuant to, or following up Ms. O'Bannon's comments, if at the next meeting, which is maybe held outside of the city of Richmond, but the body wanted to allow for the remote participation of members pursuant to the policy, you could adopt that policy at the very beginning of that meeting. And of course, if a member were participating remotely, they couldn't participate in that vote until that policy were adopted by the body. But then, once it is, it's effective immediately, so then they can participate in that meeting. So I'm just offering that for consideration.
Mr. Carroll, yes, sir.
To follow up what Mr. Gregory said, the problem with that is if we don't have a quorum, because too many people are not here, then we actually can't take action.
That's right. You still have to have a physical quorum present at the physical meeting
So
location.
you can't adopt something without the quorum, chicken or the egg, so to speak.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's a requirement of the state law, the FOIA code modification and the policy is that you still, for individual members to participate remotely, you still have to have a physical quorum present at the meeting location, at the physical meeting location. Now, of course, that's different for all virtual public meetings, but there you are.
And to follow up with
Ms.
that,
O'Bannon,
so if you have the all virtual meeting, you still have to have a quorum?
No,
That's
as
what
I
you're
just,
saying.
that's what I just said, it's
That's what I
different.
thought.
For that, obviously, you wouldn't have a physical quorum
That's right.
present, that's for all virtual meetings. Now, interestingly, I don't wanna confuse matters, but I will. The all virtual public meeting allowance under FOIA applies to public bodies, but not to local government public bodies. So your board of supervisors or town council or city council doesn't have that capability.
All right.
But regional public bodies like the TPO, like Plan RVA, like the CBTA are permitted to do that if they adopt the policy.
so this is a discussion item. I want to make sure I recognize any policy board members before I ask any questions. So, two questions. The policy as presented, it's A, not inconsistent with our bylaws, and B, it comports to state law.
Yes, sir.
Okay. If we meet next month, we don't have a location yet, but if we meet next month in Hanover, and we have not adopted this policy, which if we don't adopt today, we will not have adopted it at next month's meeting, then there can be no virtual participation, is that correct?
That's correct. Now, as I mentioned before, they could still view the meeting.
Correct, but there could, no virtual participation other than, but I think of participation is, engagement and talking and, okay, all right,
Yes, sir.
thank you. So last question I have is, where are you? Can you scroll up to page 2 of 3? The bottom of 2 of 3, where it says 2 of 3.
Which one?
Number 5 on page 24.
Is that under which policy? Is that
It's on the screen now.
Is that the remote participation of members?
It's a process to confirm approval or disapproval of participation from a remote location. And I just think,
That's not the full virtual
Okay,
meetings, but
gotcha.
remote participation.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just want to make sure that I, as chair, but this also involves the entire policy board. Once we have a quorum here, say we're here in Richmond on Hall Street or wherever, once we have a quorum, if somebody has made an inquiry to me, I'd like to participate remotely, the whole board has to vote. I need to make a decision, the chair, whoever's chair needs to make a decision to approve or disapprove the request. Then the whole board has to vote to approve or disapprove. And the question to the policy board is the chair complying with our policy?
Correct.
Okay,
Now, all the body is deciding is your compliance with the policy to
but there
approve
has
or
to be, there has to be a quorum and a vote has to be taken to allow anybody that requested of the chair.
Right, but your decision is your decision. The body's vote is just to note or to decide that you're in compliance with the policy. So there's a check, right?
Okay, that's fine. It feels a bit cumbersome, but I guess it's probably in compliance with state law, or is that just a true policy decision?
That's in conformance with state law.
Thank you. That answers that. Ms. O'Bannon?
I've said this before, but it says in here that the remotely participating member can be heard by all persons. That's good that everybody, but just the voice. The FOIA council did debate, I know I've said this before, that you have to be able to see the person.
Right.
So I would assume at least when they sign in or something, I mean, so should we put that in here?
I would not recommend it, and I know the FOIA council did debate that, and that was a subject of discussion during the legislative process. But there is no requirement of visual image of the person be provided for. And I think, that's a practical response to the fact that people can call in by phone. And they may not have a video screen or perhaps
Internet.
they may not have internet. They may be in a location like, this is a statewide statute, right? So not everybody around the state has that capability. So they can always call in.
Is it, okay. Is there, I hate to say this, but again, it was a big discussion.
It was.
So that, and I know I've talked about it a couple of times, but this is left up to the chairman to identify this person as the real person? Is that what this is saying too? Is that?
It doesn't say that, but I think that's what you have is a practical need to make sure that the person is who they say they are.
Well, I have Skype on my cell phone. I could call in Zoom and Skype and stuff on
Who's
my
gonna
phone.
crash a TPO
But I'm just
meeting?
saying that was a big part of the discussion.
It was.
All right.
Mr. Carroll?
Mr. Chair, I do realize that this is the discussion item only, however, we have had problems in the past trying to have votes because we didn't have a quorum. And I would hate to see it happen at our next meeting that we didn't have a quorum, and then we couldn't even allow anybody who wanted to participate remotely. We would have in the future have the ability to amend this policy, because it's only a policy, at any time if necessary. And so I think it would be prudent for us to move forward with this today, approve it, and then if we need to make some modifications after review, we can do it later. I make that in the form of a motion to approve.
I have a real problem with that. if I
Well,
may.
first of all, we have a motion to approve this policy today for Mr. Carroll, a second from Ms. Thornton, or Jordan, sorry, Ms. Jordan, sorry.
Clarifying question, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Which one?
Yeah,
yes,
which one
so-
or both?
Motion to approve both.
I could not approve that. I have
Well,
too many
hold on,
questions
hold on,
with
hold on,
the
hold on.
re-
Any discussion? Ms. O'Bannon?
with the all virtual public meetings, I have some questions here that I have not asked, and I want to check up on some things. I will say with an individual participating remotely, I believe that would be fine, but I have a real problem with doing both of them. The all virtual one, local governments can't do this, as you mentioned, and I've had no experience with this. I want to talk to several people.
Well, if I may,
Mr. Gregory?
not to be argumentative, but we've had experience with this for the past 2.5 years under COVID, which was and this is based, the process and everything is based upon that. These two draft policies before you today, which are on the floor for action, are based upon the sample policies that were provided by the FOIA Council staff. So this is basically what they recommend. If a public body wants to enact these policies, this is compliant with state law. I simply made minor modifications for this body to make it simple and
Thank you, Mr. Gregory.
Makes sense.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Williams?
to Mr. Carroll's point, what constitutes quorum? I remember we had the problem with quorum when we were changing the bylaws because it was a different requirement. We haven't had problems with quorum other than that I recall. So what is the quorum that we would need to be able to move with the adoption, either this, this meeting or next meeting? What's the quorum required? What's the vote?
I'll let Mr. Gregory or Mr. Parsons answer that. What's a quorum? What means a quorum?
pursuant to Article 5, Section 2 of the bylaws, a quorum shall exist when the majority of the votes allocated to voting member organizations are represented by members or alternates at the meeting. Vacancies shall not be considered in the establishment of a quorum.
So that's, if I may, that's not a number count, that's not a head count, because there's weighted, a person can represent based on which jurisdiction you're from, right?
That's correct.
So, okay. Does that answer the question, what's a quorum? Ms.
So
Leslie?
just so that I'm clear again, so quorum would depend, is weighted.
So
It's the number, it's a percentage of, percentage of the votes.
majority of the votes allocated to voting member organizations. So as you recall, different member, okay.
Mr. Carroll?
Mr. Chair, two things. One, as in reference to the quorum, I do believe that we all had to submit an order of representation from each jurisdiction as who could actually represent, in our case, Mr. Winslow, Mr. Holland, and so forth. I would be amenable to, based on my compadre's concerns, to amend my motion to only approve the individual policy, and we can approve the other one, the group one, later. So I would be amenable to amend my motion to approve only the individual remote, and if that would make you feel better.
I was gonna ask for that. So thank
Would you consider?
Thank you, Mr. Carroll, and Ms. Jordan, would you accept that as an amendment to
I guess I would just say, I mean, my interest in supporting this motion was, I think for the first year or so I was on council, I never met anyone. We were all virtual. That's not ideal, but worse than that is not being able to conduct your local business.
I agree.
And we do not know what could happen, and I would rather have this in place than struggle and miss, deadlines and have work pile up. So, I mean, that's why I supported it. I mean, I would welcome hearing from others. We've only heard from 3 people right now.
We didn't do all
Wait a
virtual.
minute, just, let me.
I'm talking about my city council.
I know.
Yeah.
Ms. Jordan has the floor
Yeah.
right now. Let's just keep it one person at a time if we could. Anybody wish to speak to the motion? The motion has not been amended yet because the second to the amendment hasn't been accepted. And I might need to look to Mr. Gregory.
Well, actually, I didn't make a motion to amend, I said I would be amenable to do that. But we're still on the original motion.
I'll make a motion to amend that. That was what my next.
I think I would have to do
Well, I think that's out
You have
of,
to do.
Yes.
that motion is out of order. I think we have a motion on the floor. So I'm either gonna call for the vote, or if Ms. Jordan is not inclined to.
I just would be interested in the consensus, like.
Well, I will just say this, if we don't approve both today, the second one for the entire group is gonna be on the agenda next policy board meeting for consideration. That's all I would offer.
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Yes.
going to interrupt you, Ms. Jordan.
Yep, Mr. Williams.
To her point, and being able to take the temperature of the body before we do this vote, what's the downside with the amended motion that's being put forward? And I understand, and do we now have an amended motion? That's my first question. We
Not
don't?
yet.
We don't.
Original
We do
motion's
not.
on the floor.
No.
We do
Okay.
not.
So I'll make that motion in a minute, but I want the same thing that she wants. I would like to have some feeling about, what's the temperature in the room about going forward with just part of it today, okay? And that was, with remote members. We can address, the entire body meeting remotely next meeting. What I want to hear from the body is, what's wrong with that? What are we missing if we go forward with that?
Okay, if anybody wishes to speak to the motion that's on the floor, that's still open for discussion, and I'm gonna wrap it up pretty soon and call for a vote. Mr. Carroll.
I would just say that with the original motion that I made, again, we have the opportunity, if there's an issue with either one of these, to amend them at the next meeting.
Correct.
All we're doing is put a policy in place that we can easily change in the future. I think everybody here has always been proven to be respectful to one another's thoughts and processes, and that's why I made the motion to move forward. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I disagree. There have been times when people have
Ms.
been,
O'Bannon.
okay, there have been times when people have been disrespectful. And I'm not even gonna really go there, but I would just like the time to go over and analyze this. I read this with not having the expectation of voting on it at this meeting.
It's a fair point. It's on the agenda as a discussion item.
And it's only and I read it, and I didn't pick up on a couple of things that I've since marked that I asked them questions. I have no problem with the one about the remote of one member, because we had that incident happen. I thought we had it in our bylaws that somebody could, we don't? I thought we already had it in there that.
No, what you did back in May was remove the prohibition on remote
So we
participation.
just removed the prohibition.
Right.
So this sets the policy for that. I got that in reading it. But, and I know the other that you may have met, but it was because of a major emergency. What constitutes impractical and unsafe assemble a quorum? I don't have a definition for that here. I mean, in other words, this is probably fine, but perhaps we need a definition of that. I am not ready to vote on the second. That's just my
Thank you, Ms. O'Bannon. Okay, Mr. Thornton?
Mr. Chairman, in the spirit of collegiality and also of understanding, maybe one of my colleagues may want to just give it some thought. This was presented just for informational purposes. I don't see where anything would be damaged by giving members around the table who feel uneasy about this a little bit more additional time, because this judicial body is gonna make the best decision anyway. But sometimes I think we overtalk sometime and overdo things. But the spirit is very important for the harmony of this whole group, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Thornton.
I concur.
Mr.
With the
Holland?
assessment, I concur with the assessment, let's give it some more time.
Mr. Holland, thank you. All right, seeing no other discussion, roll call vote, please, and understand the motion is to adopt.
Stated, yeah.
I'm just going to restate it, please, but the motion is to adopt the policy as presented in its entirety.
Both policies.
Both policies in their entirety. That's the motion that's on the floor. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hodges?
Nay.
Mr. Atkins?
Nay.
Mr. Carroll?
Aye.
Mr. Holland?
Nay.
Chair Lumpkins?
No.
Ms. Laspolette?
Yes.
Ms. O'Bannon? Nay. Mr. Thornton?
Nay.
Mr. Williams?
No.
Ms. Carmack? Mr. Addison?
Nay.
Ms. Jordan? No. Dr. Newbill?
No.
Ms. Adams?
No.
Ms. Dean?
No.
And Mr. Riblet?
Abstain.
The motion did not carry.
Thank you. Okay, this will reappear next.
No, I would like to make a motion that we accept the first portion of remote participation for individual members,
I'll second it.
just that part. It fits with what we just changed in May in our policy. I did read this carefully and it does fit, and the terminology that's used does fit with what we had attempted to do.
Okay.
And if people are concerned about, they can certainly vote no for that.
I understand the motion. I don't know, did somebody second it?
I did.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carroll did, thank you.
So I'll
Okay,
just
so,
throw that out there.
so the motion is, if I make sure, to approve the one policy that speaks to remote member participation. Is that correct, Ms. O'Bannon? Ms. O'Bannon, is the motion to approve the one policy that speaks to member participation?
Just member participation.
Remote
And-
participation.
And I will follow up with it. We did discuss this in May. We did change their policy to say that change it from not.
I was just trying to understand the motion. Do I understand it correctly?
Yes.
Thank you. So any discussion on the motion that's been seconded?
And I do recognize that many people wanted.
Ms. O'Bannon?
I do recognize that many people wanted to read it more carefully for the next time, but I also am trying to accommodate what the concern was, that if we meet in a remote location, we already have established that. So,
Thank you, Ms. O'Bannon. Any other discussion? Hearing none, and nobody's raising their hand online.
Yeah.
And you can probably go back to the screen so people can see.
Okay.
Thank you. And when you get set up, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hodges?
Aye.
Mr. Atkins?
Aye.
Mr. Carroll?
Aye.
Mr. Holland?
Aye.
Chair Lumpkins?
Aye.
Ms. Laspolette?
Aye.
Ms. O'Bannon? Aye. Mr. Thornton?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Carmack?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Addison?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan? Aye. Dr. Newbill?
Did you call for me? I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am. For the
Aye.
vote. Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Adams? Aye. Ms. Dean? Aye. Mr. Riblet?
Aye.
Thank you, that motion carries.
Thank you for the discussion, and so next month, we will have the second policy on, for an action item. I'm anticipating it will be on, this is an action item.
Virtual, yeah.
The virtual, entire virtual. Mr. Bushing, you're up. Thank you, everybody, for a good discussion, and we're talking about the GRTC's request for, I guess, a TIP amendment, correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the board. So this item is a set of TIP amendments requested by GRTC. Just a little bit of background, this is sort of an annual process, so as GRTC updates their capital planning, reflects new funding that's been awarded, they need to reflect that in the TIP as well, so we can obligate those federal dollars. There were 17 projects that were submitted for revisions. The majority, 10 of them, were very minor changes. Those were already processed at the staff level. Our software, so we're next to our software. So the first is the computer software side. So this is again a decrease of $5 million in total. You can see it's across the board every year, a decrease in planned obligations. The flip side is the computer hardware, and this one is actually showing an increase in planned obligations of $3.7 million in total, and of that it's spread across the FY22 to FY24. And the final one is the purchase of support vehicles, and this one has a decrease in FY23, an increase in FY24 for a net gain of just under $500,000 in planned expenses on this project. So one of the key elements of the TIP is that we need to maintain fiscal constraint. So basically we need to be able to demonstrate that these projects are fundable and feasible within the budget and available revenues. The table on the screen demonstrates that. As you can see, for most funding sources, we actually see a decrease across the four-year program in funding. The only difference there is the FTA 5339, which is for bus purchases, and this reflects a grant that GRTC was awarded this past cycle from the federal government. So this is actually good news, it's additional revenue for them. So we had a 15-day public comment period in September. We received no comments. TAC reviewed this request in September as well, and they unanimously recommended approval of the amendments. So the action requested today is that the policy board approves the amendment of the TIP as shown on the draft TIP pages, which are in your agenda packet. And then the second part of the resolution is related to air quality conformity. It's that the two new projects, the two studies that are being added, are exempt from the conformity process, so we can go ahead and add them and obligate those dollars. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. If there are any specifics about the details for the projects, I will defer to GRTC for answers.
Thank you, Mr. Bushing. So as you noted, it comes to this board with TAC recommendations. I will,
Can we pause the meeting for just a moment? We've just been notified that the audio has dropped and
okay,
we.
all right, we'll pause for a moment to, maybe, we've been at this long enough, maybe we'll take a 5-minute stretch break.
We'll work on that.
All right, we'll be back in 5 minutes, just for a short recess, and don't go too far, Mr. Bushing.
We got it.
Yeah, wasn't expecting.
Reasonable, you know.
Oh, wait, we did the singles.
What's it? Oh, too funny. Susan.
I know what's going on, to say this is a legitimate argument, but I've never asked to do this. I've 3 times, but only with 2 people, never had it 3 times. And another time, when he said something about his car breaking down, on my case, I had to go for it. And they accepted it.
I'm not aware what that was like.
No, but you could, I hate to say it, but the other thing is, if I go downtown, I can't find parking. I'll be in the parking lot.
Whatever you did fixed it, so.
It's good now.
Yeah, it was bad.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure what happened, but Adrian, I was trying to turn the podium mics on, you didn't scare me for the class.
You weren't here.
Whatever, like when you text me back,
Yeah,
it's fine.
okay.
Well, it's Adrian's on, she said, "Come right back."
Yeah, I turned on the podium mic because I thought I was getting him speaking, and then I get maybe it might have clashed or something,
They
but.
they let me know,
Yeah.
I've just paused it now.
Definitions, and that's why.
Yeah, okay. I'll do breakfast, don't work.
We're back in session. Before Mr. Bushing continues his presentation, I just want to give the floor to Ms. Dean from RMTA, just to give her report, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize, but I have to leave early because I have an 11:30 with my auditors, and you don't want to keep them waiting. But I just wanted to just introduce myself. I typically don't have too much to say, but my name is Joy Taylor Dean. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Richmond Metropolitan Transportation Authority, otherwise known as the RMTA. We were created in 1966 by the legislature. We are a political subdivision, and we're governed by a board of 16, 5 from the city of Richmond, 5 from Henrico County, 5 from Chesterfield County, and 1 member from the Commonwealth Transportation Board. We are completely self-sustaining. All of the revenues that we collect go back to the maintenance and operation of the roadway, as well as to our bondholders. And so, I look forward to just having additional conversation with you throughout these months. And if you're so inclined, our board meets the second Tuesday of every month, and our meetings are open to the public. So should you want to check out what we're doing, feel free to reach out to me, and I will make sure you get the information.
Are they exciting as our meetings?
Of course. Probably.
Thank you.
So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Dean. Thank you so much for, good luck on the audit.
Thank you.
Miles,
Take care.
I think we're ready for any questions on the TIP amendments, the GRTC TIP amendments. And I think I started to say that as Mr. Bushing pointed out, it comes to us with the unanimous TAC recommendation. The executive committee did not address this today, but at our meeting. And Mr. Bushing, the sheet tells us that that this was posted for public review, and any comments would be shared with this policy board. I take it because no comments are in the agenda, and no comments were, you didn't say that any comments were received. Does that mean no comments were received as far as you know?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, no comments were received.
All right, any questions for Mr. Bushing on this item? The chair will entertain a motion.
I move approval.
Second.
Okay,
You can let.
thank you. Mr. Holland, motion, and Ms. O'Bannon seconded. We heard you, Dr. Newbill, we're just a little late. But we are connected in the sound.
Next time.
That's right. But the sound seems to be working, which is good. We're back. Technical problems are resolved. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Mr. Atkins.
Aye.
Mr. Carroll.
Aye.
Mr. Holland.
Aye.
Chair Lumpkins.
Aye.
Ms. Lascallette.
Aye.
Ms. O'Bannon.
Aye.
Mr. Thornton.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Ms. Carmack.
Aye.
Mr. Addison.
Aye.
Dr. Newbill.
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Adams.
Aye.
And Mr. Riblett.
Aye.
That motion carries.
Thank you. So trying to make up a little time here, the item 3, transportation forum planning. The executive committee, when we met earlier, we're discussing, as I told you earlier, the role of the executive committee. One of the things we agreed upon, a request we have of the policy board is that the policy board, we can do this by voice vote if you're so inclined, direct and authorize the executive committee to take the lead on our transportation forum planning. In other words, the executive committee will coordinate more closely with staff in terms of the forum planning. And we'll just take care of it is the idea. The executive committee will take care of it. And under the bylaws, as you all may know, things that the policy board tasks the executive committee with, the executive committee is thereby authorized to perform. So if somebody on the executive committee wishes to make a motion, if it's a second, I will ask the policy board to direct that the executive committee take the lead and coordinate and handle with staff, the transportation forum planning.
So moved, Mr.
Chairman.
Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second that motion. Again, the caveat being, as long as Dr. Newbill is on the executive committee.
I was gonna say.
And Dr. Newbill, thank you for the motion.
I did hear that again, yes.
She's listening. So that was, motion was by Dr. Newbill, seconded by Mr. Williams of Powhatan. And again, this motion, I'll just make it clear, it's just for this year. This is not a standing thing, but it's just for this year. With that, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you very much. Made up a little time. Now we're going to dive right into scenario planning project update. And Mr. Parsons will lead that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a really brief update, but I did want to let the board know that we are under contract with a consultant to provide support to develop the scenario planning project that is on our work program. It is a major component of our staff time for this fiscal year. We are excited about the process and are in the process of scheduling our kickoff meeting, our internal meeting with staff and the consulting team to lay out the schedule, the task commitments for staff, and once that occurs over the next few weeks, I will look forward to coming back to the board as well as the TAC because they will play a major role in the development of this project and providing more updates, especially for opportunities for public engagement and the ability to get this project out into the community and engage the general population and the residents of each of our 9 jurisdictions.
Thank you. Any questions? We're running late. I think this is a good topic. Will there be a chance to discuss this? Do you imagine discussing this in an upcoming policy board meeting? I think there's lots of things to get a better understanding of what exactly scenario planning, where are you getting your inputs? I think that this board probably has an interest in. I would agree. Yeah. So let's keep this on the agenda to pick it up at a time when we have a little more time to make sure we understand what are the inputs and what the deliverables and that sort of thing. With that, we'll keep moving, and our last item under new business, which was added at the beginning of our meeting, is the TPO annual report. It was emailed to us. I don't know if folks need to.
Yes, sir, I can provide some background on this.
39 pages, so it's going to be too much to put up on the screen, but yeah, if you, Mr. Parsons, if you'll lead us through and
I am going to show the cover sheet. As you can see, this is very similar, if not identical, to the monthly status reports that you see before each meeting. This is intentional. The format for the annual report and our quarterly reports is developed in cooperation with VDOT for the reporting on the grants that we utilize through the TPO for both VDOT and the RRTPO. We have taken it upon ourselves as staff to do a monthly report for you that uses the same type of format. So essentially, the annual report is a compilation of all of our monthly and quarterly reports from the past fiscal year. And as you move through it, it shows it's very similar in format. It shows each project task, the budget that was approved for the task for the fiscal year, the total funds expended for the fiscal year, and then has text and notes about the work that was actually completed for the fiscal year under that task. So right now, this is program management, as you can see, lots of things, public outreach and equity analysis. It follows the same flow as the monthly reports that you review. What we are asking today is to approve this compiled annual report so that we can submit it to VDOT and our federal partners for their use and information in validating that our grants were spent properly.
Thank you. Any questions? Ms. O'Bannon?
So this is a requirement this time of year, I know, right? Is it October and November?
The general consensus is, once we get to July and the fiscal year is over, that we put together the annual report and get it submitted as soon as possible.
All right, okay, thank you. And they require this, right? Okay. Just thought it would be clear.
Ms. O'Bannon said they require it, and they being,
VDOT and
Our funding partners,
funding partners.
VDOT, the RPT.
Okay.
any other questions or comments on the annual report? All right, Chair will entertain a motion.
Go ahead then.
Move adoption of the.
Second.
Not even gonna wait to hear
As
what.
presented.
Not even gonna wait to hear what the motion is. So,
Move to approve the annual report, the compiled annual report, as presented.
thank you, Mr. Hodges.
Second.
Ms. O'Bannon seconds it. Thank you both. Any discussion on the motion? Roll call for this one, right?
Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Mr. Atkins.
Aye.
Mr. Carroll.
Aye.
Mr. Holland.
Aye.
Chair Lumpkins.
Aye.
Ms. Laskowlet.
Aye.
Ms. O'Bannon.
Aye.
Mr. Thornton.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Ms. Carmack.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Addison.
Aye.
Dr. Newbill.
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Adams.
Aye.
Mr. Riblett.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you, that passes. Is anybody here from GRTC? Is somebody still online? Oh, go back there. Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Why don't you go ahead and we'll start with you.
Sure, I'll give a brief update. I'm Cheryl Adams. I'm serving currently as the interim CEO. We are in the process of looking for a permanent chief executive officer. So the advertisement is out on the street as we speak. So hopefully we will have someone in place soon. The only update I have is our board member meeting, which is normally on the third Tuesday of each month, will be on the fourth Tuesday this month because of our shareholders meeting. So we will be having 4 new directors joining our board. And so we are looking forward to those people that are joining and doing great things.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Adams. Any questions, comments? Well, and so I think I'm looking at the future meetings. I think we have microtransit
Yes.
discussion coming up soon. So I know we're looking forward to that. That's been discussed. I know y'all are working on that. So that's in the future, but thank you for this update. And
Yes, we hope to have something next month. I'm ready.
awesome. Thank you for joining us. DRT?
The DRPT update is posted on the website and was included. DRPT is not able to join us.
And we actually have Ms. Dubinsky, who was able to join us remotely just recently.
Okay.
So she is on there now, if she would like to.
Hi, Mr. Dubinsky. You may have heard Mr. Parsons say that your update is posted on the website. Do you have anything for us? I know we're running a little late, so if you have anything, please.
The only thing I will mention, everything is located on the agency update, but I do want to highlight that we will have a new chief of public transportation. His name is Zach Trogdon, and his previous role was with the Williamsburg Area Transit Authority, or WADA. He served as their executive director. So he will be starting with us on October 25th, and I hope to be able to bring him around for the next meeting to introduce you all when he starts. But I just wanted to highlight that we now have a new chief, and he will be much welcome. And so our acting chief will resume his responsibilities as director of transit planning. Besides that, the agency update just highlights some upcoming events that are related to our Section 5310, including webinars that are a requirement for any agency applying for 5310 funds. And then just a couple other things related to transit asset management, which may have more relevance to TAC, but for the sake of time, I'll go ahead and just refer to my agency update, and I'd be glad to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you so much, and exciting big news in your agency, and appreciate the update. Any questions, comments to the FTP? Good. Well, we look forward to meeting your director, and thank you for the update, and thank you for joining us too. Thanks for jumping in and joining us.
You're welcome.
Vito, Mr. Ritter?
Good morning, I'll be brief as well. In our agency update, we provided links to the September CTV meetings with noteworthy presentations. The links do provide you not only access to the meeting agenda, but to the presentations that were shared. I will say that noteworthy in their action meeting, the SPA agreement for the northern section of the Fall Line Trail was approved by the CTV in September. That was certainly good news. The next meeting is in Virginia Beach, October 25th for the workshop session, October 26th for the action meeting. There is not anticipated to be a November meeting due to the holidays. Smart Scale, very quick update on round 5. Validation is underway. We do anticipate that scoring for the applications that were submitted will be completed by the end of December. A couple of quick updates on the Fall Line Trail. We still are on schedule for getting the design build contract on the street this calendar year for the northern segment of the trail. Like I mentioned, the agreement was approved by the CTV. The southern segment, Design Build 2, as it's referred to in the Fall Line Trail Working Group, is anticipated to be on the street by mid-2023. We appreciate the opportunity to continue working with the CBTA and the Fall Line Trail Working Group to assist in prioritizing where dollars can be associated and what segments of the trail can be funded. At this point, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, good update. So, yeah. Well, again, there's a lot of, we'll be hearing a lot more about the Fall Line Trail in the months ahead. That's exciting. Any questions?
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Mark, who's gonna be the new district engineer?
If we only had that crystal ball. I do know that Mr. Totten, our deputy, is in that acting role right now, and certainly as soon as we know who is gonna take that position permanently, we'll make sure the MPO is advised.
Y'all have any timetable for that?
I have not been made aware of any timetable. I would expect as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Ribble. All right, jump back up to CBTA. Mr. Parsons will give us an update on the CBTA.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have it linked in the agenda packet, but the CBTA, as always, has been very, very active. In the month of September, the Fall Line Working Group met on September 7th and is now looking at, I think that this, we'll call it the deficiency of funds to fully complete the trail. The trail is going to cost more than the funds that are available, so we are now working through the Fall Line Working Group outside of the 2 design build projects to work through a prioritization system for the remaining part of the trail and which sections should receive funds first. So that's a monumental task, and it's something that I think the work group is certainly up to do, but it is taking a lot of coordination and conversation at the work group. The Technical Advisory Committee and the Finance Committee have met both in September and advised for the September 23rd full authority meeting. Those discussion items are noted in the report in the packet, and it's really been focused the last month or so on planning for the next round. A lot of what we are doing, both at the TPO, the CBTA, and locally, is dependent on smart scale outcomes. So we're starting to plan for those smart scale decisions and what that means for available CBTA regional funds, as well as any committed local funds, and whether those will remain tied to the projects that they're currently tied to, or if it will there will be some fluctuation depending on smart scale awards and how those funds can be used moving forward. We do have upcoming meetings for this month. The Fall Line Working Group took the month off, but starting next week, the Technical Advisory Committee and the Finance Committee both meet on October 12th due to the Columbus Day holiday, and then the CBTA will be meeting on October 28th.
Thank you. Any questions? I know we have a lot of CBTA, a lot of folks that serve on this board serve on the CBTA, and I know Goochland appreciates the approving a reprogramming request. That's appreciated from our colleagues. Mr. Parsons, I have a broad question that, again, time constraints. But I'm curious if staff and you and staff have thoughts on how you will advise these regional bodies to handle a situation, say, for instance, because the TPO handles the regional smart scale projects, correct? I mean, CBTA says project X is a regional project, and so the TPO then handles the smart scale application from there. And CBTA has earmarked funds for a project, right?
CBTA is leveraging funds for particular projects. The TPO has 10 applications that they are able to submit for smart scale. But it's all about the cooperative effort and the collaboration between the two different agencies, the two different boards to
Okay,
make
so
sure.
so I heard some people said no, but you're taking a regional, and this is a question, you're taking a regional application for X, and it has an X amount of money that is being, you said it's leveraging, so there's no commitment, but there's an amount we're putting on the application as potential CBTA funds to leverage the application?
There are funds noted in the applications from various sources, whether it's CBTA or local funds or other previously committed funds to help leverage and make those applications more attractive.
So in your role and staff's role, are you all looking at how you will advise and guide and recommend to these boards how to handle a situation when a regional smart scale application moves forward, and as we get further into the process, the more detailed estimate comes in higher than what was expected, when we started?
Yes, sir, that's a great point, and again, this is probably another 30-minute conversation that we can have another day.
Well, the question was, is staff looking at it? Are you looking
Yes.
at it, and are you positioning yourselves hopefully to advise the boards you work for?
Yes, sir. We are well aware of the importance of cost estimates right now and the escalation of those estimates over time. And that is something that we are trying to, especially through the work with both SACs from the CBTA and the TPO, to understand the implications of costs coming in high and what that means for commitments of funding at all levels.
Mr. Carroll, did you have?
Yeah, I mean, the staff will be certainly working with the CBT on it, but also our financial advisor will be actually providing information as to, what we will need to do to take a look at how we program dollars. Because, when we approved our financial package back in April, May, the original 276 million, we did a 90-10 pay-go with 10% reserve, and we may have to restructure that based on cost overruns. But all of that will be looked at both by staff and by our financial advisor.
Okay. Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman, when, at the end of my term as chairman, one of the things that I wanted us as a body to look at, we were getting cost overruns that we couldn't account for. And I said at that meeting, every capital improvement plan program is underwater today. It's a fact, because we know what's happening in the world economy.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a second issue that came up. And this other issue was, how do the cost estimates get built that come to us? Now, there was two paths. It was one, VDOT would do the cost estimates, right, Mark? And then the cost estimates could come from the locality. Is that correct, Mr. Parsons?
Those are two sources.
Okay, those are the two choices. So the question that was raised was, okay, is there one way better than the other? And where is the clearinghouse for consensus on what is the cost? Is there any divergence in the methodology of the way these cost estimates are being built? That was the question. And I still have the same question today, because there's two issues here. The methodology by which these cost estimates are put together, and then the second issue is the cost that's right now going through the economy. It's almost impossible to correct me, Mark, if I'm wrong, to come up with a reasonable cost estimate anticipating the increases that are coming from inflation and from limited supply chains. So that was the question that we had, and I thought we were going to go forward in being able to answer those questions and come back with information. In a sidebar conversation before this meeting, we talked about, maybe going back to the localities and getting more information about how they're building the process, but it has to be a collaborative effort. Those are my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Ridley?
Just, I will add that, and for any project that is going through a smart scale review right now for round 5, VDOT staff is working with the applicants, be it localities or MPO staff, to validate those estimates on the applications. So for the applications that had CVTA leveraging funds, frankly, for all applications, we're validating those estimates, trying to account for inflation impacts, unit cost impacts, as best we can.
What's the time frame for, like you said, you're in the process of validating, what?
We would hope to have the estimates validated by the end of the year as well. That's a component of the scoring, because the scoring is a cost benefit, relationship. So we absolutely have to have the estimates validated to have the scoring completed.
Okay, yeah, discussion for another day, but I guess if the validation comes back and it's quite in contrast to what the initial was, then we're back to the question, like, okay, what's the validity of these various resources? Okay. All right, well, you've answered my question, that staff is aware that and planning and anticipating and working with the bodies to deal with it. All right, any questions of Mr. Parsons on CVTA? We're in the home stretch here. Future meeting topics, if you see it, thank you, Mr. Parsons, for putting that in there. I'm trying to capture some dates and we have the microtransit coming up and then some other things in work, so that's there. Comments from board members. Anybody wish to speak? Mr. Thornton.
Mr. Chairman, that be, the word I was using before, in the context of congeniality. Sometimes some people believe that it's the small things or the little things that make the big differences. This member has been on this august board for since 1999 on the year 2000. There is something that we passed over that I hope that people will now give it more credence, and that is public comments. When some of us first started, we did not have that. And so I think this is a testament to some of you around the table. We've been working for this over the years, so people may not have taken advantage of it, but it's there now, which was not there. And I think that's a good thing, talk about the benevolence of this organization, Mr. Chairman. So I want to mention that the public good.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just echo Mr. Thornton's comments, because he's been around, he's seen the changes that have occurred with this body. As I've said many times, he's the godfather when it comes to this issue about transparency and having information out into the community. He's pounded the table for as long as I've been coming down here, and it's been a while back. I think I started coming down here around '04, but he precedes me. But now with the technology, with where we've evolved as a body, we're doing a much better job, but we're not through yet. And that's the goal he's always had, and I just want to applaud him for what he's done.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Any other member comments? I would echo that. Thank you all for the good discussion today and the exchange. It's an honor and pleasure to work with you all. Next meeting is November 3rd. We are going to, unfortunately, we don't have the place pinned down yet, but we will get that out very soon and look forward to seeing everybody in November. We are adjourned.
Okay. Always good seeing you, Ms. Wade. Always good seeing you. You're full of energy, you know, age at all.
Take care, Mr. Williams.
Sit there.